New reporting from author and reporter Brian Stelter reveals that in the immediate aftermath of the insurrection, some employees at Fox were alarmed at the consequences of their work. Quote, Fox News was a radicalization engine and some employees knew it. They felt it in their bones. When I was trying to fall asleep early in the morning of January the 7th, trying to forget the terror of the long day, my phone lit up with a text from a guilt-stricken Fox News veteran. The 4 words were like something out of a nightmare. What have we done? Stelter writing further in new reporting that Fox News executives have been turning a blind eye to Carlson for some time now. Quote, executives at Fox felt Carlson had taken the O'Reilly mantle, so to speak, and they were much more interested in his ratings than his rhetoric. It's a network that has given Tucker Carlson a platform to mainstream white supremacy and far-right conspiracies and made him so powerful that at this point, writes Stelter, he no longer even needs Trump, which is astonishing when you consider how much airtime the network has spent spewing destructive, mad lies on behalf of Donald Trump.
The Russia hoax, those lies, they're dead and buried.
Joe Biden's campaign, his transition, and likely his White House will be filled with big tech. They rigged this election against the president.
You know what the biggest lie is that restaurants are spreaders of COVID. There's no science for that.
The next time you see someone in a mask on the sidewalk or on the bike path, do not hesitate. Ask politely but firmly, would you please take off your mask?
Author Brian Stelter joins me now. He's CNN's chief media correspondent and anchor of reliable sources. His book, Hoax, Donald Trump, Fox News, and the Dangerous Distortion of Truth, is out now in paperback with 12, count them, 12 chapters of new reporting. Brian, thanks so much for coming on the show. That is a lot of new reporting, a dozen new chapters, astounding number for an author to add. A lot has happened. Yet you write that Fox News isn't the same place it was when you first published your book last summer. What's changed?
No, I think the radicalization is real and it's getting worse. And you can see it based on the programming, based on the number of hours of opinion programming, based on the journalists who have been either fired or have decided to leave because they couldn't take it anymore. All throughout the schedule, you can see the radicalization taking effect. And Tucker Carlson is the greatest or worst example of this. A false flag conspiracy about the riot is something that is appalling, is easily fact-checkable, is easily debunked, as numerous websites have done today. But Fox is not in the fact-checking business. They are in the denial of fact business. And in that way, I think it is getting much worse.
So, as you mentioned, Tucker Carlson spreading a conspiracy theory. We opened this segment with the clip from his show last night. And that's the kind of thing that will become mainstream very quickly on the right. What he says one day will become, you know, the mantra for Republicans in Congress and others the next day. How does that make Fox News anything other than a propaganda outlet? I mean, I hesitate often to use the word news, just call it Fox. Because, as you say, it's not in the fact-checking business. And, Brian, if you're not in the fact-checking business, can you really say you're in the journalism business?
Well, I'll take this from someone standing in the middle of a newsroom at CNN. There are ways to measure the product of a newsroom, the number of bureaus, the numbers of reporters, the number of hours of newscasts each day. And by all those metrics, Fox is failing. Not only is Fox failing, it is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. There was a time where there were dozens of really strong correspondents at Fox. That is not true anymore. So you are right to leave the word news out of the name. The word news is misleading. Yes, there are a little bit of news there, but it's mostly propaganda. It is Rupert Murdoch's propaganda machine, and he has made that choice. He and his son, Laughlin, have chosen to let Tucker Carlson run wild. They have chosen not to instill any leadership or management or structure there. Yes, technically there are bosses, but only in name. They let Tucker do whatever he wants, and that's to the detriment of his audience. I know his viewers like it, but he's ultimately hurting his viewers.
Oh, I mean, we'll come to COVID and how they've hurt their viewers in a moment. So I'm just wondering, Brian, have you evolved in your own views about Fox as you wrote this book and reported on it? Because you and your own network president, CNN boss Jeff Zucker, I just want to play a clip for our viewers. You and Jeff Zucker, CNN boss, had a back and forth on stage at an event in 2019. Have a listen.
So you think many of the shows are conspiracy TV?
I don't think it's a journalistic organization.
See, we disagree about this, and that's a good thing.
Yes, well, no, you know, I think that you often say that there's this difference between their primetime shows.
The news side and the opinion side.
There is no difference, and I think that I don't see it that way, and I know that you report it that way a lot. I think you're wrong.
You think I'm wrong? Well, what is the? So give me some evidence. Tell me.
Watch it.
So So, Brian, I'm with Jeff Zucker on this, especially when you look at what the so-called news side has been pumping out on the lab leak stuff in China, critical race theory nonsense, cancel culture, the end of Mr. Potato Head. None of that is news or factual. So you can't just blame Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity. Surely you now accept, what, nearly 2 years later, it's the entire network. There is no news opinion split. It's all propaganda.
My best sources have left because they can't take it anymore. I really tried to write hoax from a sourced perspective. What are staffers inside the network saying? Even conservative staffers who vote for Republicans who voted for Donald Trump, they don't recognize the channel anymore. In some cases, they are embarrassed. But here's the bad news, I think. That staffer who texted me on January 7th and said, "What have we done?" who felt regret about the riot, who wondered about Fox's culpability. My impression from all my reporting is that person's in the minority. That increasingly Fox is staffed by true believers, by producers and hosts who actually believe what they're selling. I think that's also a change from the past. So as it becomes more and more of a propaganda machine, the people who are the moderates, who are in the middle, who just want to report the fact, they're getting squeezed out. They're getting suffocated. And I would argue that's a very bad thing for the country politically, to have not a conservative news channel anymore, but instead this right-wing talk channel that's all about hating the rest of the media. Because honestly, a lot of it is about hatred.
I mean, Brian, it's definitely gotten worse. We could both agree on that, and the January 6th is a classic example. But I'm not going to ask you to name your source, but I would say, with respect to your source who said, "What have we done?" unless that source quit the next day, number one, I would question how much they're really reflecting. And number two, I mean, where was your source? Where were these kind of staffers when birtherism was being pushed, when Islamophobia was being pushed during the war on terror, when anti-Semitic tropes about George Soros were pushed for years now? All sorts of nonsense pushed on that channel. COVID. Let's talk about COVID, Brian.
But you know
hundreds of thousands of dead people in America. Go on.
You know how it works, though. People tell themselves, well, I just work for one show. I just work for one department. I'm not responsible for the rest. People put on blinders. They make excuses for themselves. Now, I may think those are BS, but I think that's what's happened within Fox. People justify it in different ways. Brett Baer, for example, says, well, I just do my 1 hour. I'm only in charge of my 1 hour. Now, I think that is a toothless claim when the rest of the networks are peddling lies. But you're right on COVID. The pandemic is the ultimate example of this. The way they downplayed and denied the threat. I think that shows up to this day in the data about vaccines. Republicans less likely to go ahead and get the vaccine. It's because of the damage done last year by Fox and Trump.
In your reporting, Brian, have you been able to answer one of the great questions that always fascinates me? You know, is it, you know, who is tail and dog wagging? Is it the Republican Party that's leading Fox News in a certain direction, the Republican base and people like Donald Trump? Or is it Fox News that's leading the Republican Party? Who's in charge here?
I argue in hoax it is largely Fox. You watch 15 minutes of Fox and Friends in the morning, and you know what GOP lawmakers are going to be talking about. Last night, Tucker made up that crazy false flag conspiracy theory. Then the next day, today, Marjorie Taylor Greene is demanding to know about the FBI operatives inside the plot. So you get these lawmakers reacting to Fox because they know that's where their base is. Not, of course, the average Republican viewer, but the activist base is obsessed with Fox. And as a result, I think it is largely Fox setting the agenda. And actually, in this case, at this point, not Trump. Trump almost invisible now in GOP politics. It's really the Fox party.
Yes. So here's a question then. Has Frankenstein lost control of its monster in terms of the base? We now have the OANNs and Newsmaxes of this world who have gone even further right, further crazy, further anti-reality than Fox has. And obviously they're not beating Fox in ratings, but they've made a dent. And long term, who knows? Has Fox lost control of this angry audience that it's helped incite for decades now?
Well, I think a dent is the right word. They did make a dent in Fox. It caused Fox to run further to the right, to radicalize. And that's why I had to add 12 new chapters, because there was so much that happened with Fox feeling pressure from the right. That has never happened before in the 25-year history of Fox News. Fox had a monopoly on right-wing TV, but not anymore. And they do feel the pressure from One American News and Newsmax. Again, not good for our politics to have a network and a party being pushed further to the right because it has this warping effect on the discourse. Every minute we spend having to debunk a crazy cancel culture theory or a critical race theory idea, every minute we spend debunking that is a minute we're not telling the real news.